Hello everyone, welcome to my brand spanking new channel. If you're interested in Yemen, you've come to the right place. I'm going to speak a little bit about what this channel is all about, but stick around to the end where I give you the 3 things that I love most about Yemen, here on The Yemenist. Welcome back to The Yemenist. Before I even get started, I first want to thank Michael Mortius for helping me build this amazing studio. It was a work in progress. So, getting into our topic, I guess at first you're probably wondering, why Yemen? Well, most people in the West particular know Yemen perhaps from a single Friends episode. There was a movie made called The Salmon Fishing in Yemen, I believe, that kind of did somewhat of a job talking about Yemen, although I never thought the actor really looked that Yemeni, to be honest. But I guess really the story of why I'm doing this has a lot to do with my experience. Over 30 years ago, I joined the Peace Corps, and I could have gone anywhere. But I get a call from the Peace Corps, and they asked me, what do you think about going to Yemen and being a volunteer there? I really didn't know that much about Yemen. I was pretty good in history, pretty good in geography. I knew where it was. I knew it was a Muslim country, but other than that, I really didn't know much at all. I definitely didn't know any Arabic. And so I told the recruiter that I would go do some research. This was obviously way before the internet. And then I'd call her back the next day. And so I went up to a local college, opened up a National Geographic, and saw this article that showed the amazing history and the culture images that kind of, even today, still stick in my brain. Because I knew at that time that I was making a special decision, a unique decision. But once I read that and understood that there was just this amazing history there, I called her back and I said, I'm in. Next thing I know, I'm on my way to Philadelphia, meeting a bunch of people that are also volunteers, and we all head to Yemen. Now, I know that a lot of people that go to Yemen, they may go there briefly as tourists. This is in the past, obviously. Some would go and study for a period of time, maybe a summer. But I was there for 2 years, and not only was I there for 2 years, but I was in a remote part of Yemen, an area next or near Ib called Ba'dan. And it was very rural. I mean, this was basically in the middle of nowhere. It took about an hour by 4-wheel drive simply to get to my village. And as a teacher, I was there day in and day out, learning the language, understanding the culture. Obviously being an outsider, I was able to just simply observe and take everything in. When I came back, I was changed. Yemen had an amazing attraction on me. Rarely does a day go by when I don't think about something that happened to Yemen, something that happened while I was in Yemen, people that I met, the smells, the sounds, all of that. I'd been thinking about doing this podcast for some time, largely because people really don't know that much about Yemen, and what they hear is often negative. And I lived there. I experienced the people, and when I came back, when I came in contact with Yemeni-Americans here, we kind of had this simpatico, this understanding of these two worlds that we could discuss and navigate. I understand their challenges here. They understood my experiences there. And it was really the only people besides the volunteers that were with me that could understand my story. I ended up working on a graduate program in history, and it was really kind of a long graduate program because I was working full time as an instructor and taking classes in the evening. And Obviously raising a family, doing all that stuff, it was very difficult as time-wise. So it took me a while. But over the course of getting my master's degree in history, I focused in on Yemen and did a lot of research. In fact, my thesis, I will post it below. So if you'd like to kind of read my work that I did over that period of time, I welcome you to do that. Please make some comments. Um, so history is my thing, and Yemen has this amazing history. And as I read about it and learned more about Yemen history, I became more and more fascinated. Islamic history, pre-Islamic history of Yemen, the revolutionary Yemen, all of the things that have made Yemen what it is. And obviously, knowing what's happening now is absolutely tragic, but it's not the full story of Yemen. It's not the full story of Yemenis. And so I thought, why not? Why don't I start a podcast that talks a lot about Yemen? And I think about all the good things about Yemen, a lot of the unknown things about Yemen that I'm not able to share often in any other format. Why not bring that here? And then I started thinking, what if I got all these people that I've read books about or have heard about, Yemenis who are doing amazing things in their stories? What if I brought them on the podcast and talked about their particular expertise? I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool thing at a time when, so much bad is happening in Yemen. And maybe ultimately, as we form this community, that we can maybe do something good. Maybe we can write Congress people here in the United States, around the world, talk to your politicians, and figure out a way around this quagmire, this horrible thing that's going on in Yemen. I don't really want to belabor too much what's going on in Yemen in this podcast. Really, I want Yemeni-Americans here, Yemenis around the world that are outside Yemen, to hear this, to listen to the stories, to hear the good things. I also want the Yemenis who are in Yemen, who either may understand English or perhaps as we go along, subtitles, to see Yemen with different eyes from someone who had lived there for a good amount of time and was able to observe the things about Yemen. And so through this podcast, I would invite all of you to tell your friends, tell them to come to the podcast, listen to some of these stories that we're going to share. And I welcome you. And most important, not most important, but very important, I would like you to subscribe to this channel and to hit the bell that's down below so we can start to grow this community, so that we can share some of the interesting things, some of the people, Yemeni-Americans, scholars, others who have spent time there, who understand Yemen, who can kind of share a real understanding about what Yemen was and what Yemen is and what Yemen can be. So I invite you all to this program and hope that you enjoy it. And I hope that there is some dialogue between us. I do want to stay away from the regional political discourse here. If I see it, I'll probably remove it, not necessarily because I discount what one side or the other feels about what's going on in Yemen, but really, I just don't want to create a place where there's tension and friction. I really want this to be a place where, whether you're from the south or the north, how you perceive the current situation, this is about understanding and caring about all of Yemen. And maybe if we can start that here, we can bring that, and maybe in small degree and in some ways, to Yemen itself. So, with that in mind, I promised you that at the end of this podcast, that I would give you the 3 things that I love most about Yemen. So I'm going to do these in reverse order. Number 3, Yemeni Ful. So Ful is, for those people that are not familiar with Middle Eastern cuisine, ful is a bean. We call it a fava bean, right? And the different areas around the Middle East cook it differently. People in Palestine, for example, they put lots of olive oil over the top. But Yemen does it exceptionally well. And I think that in a lot of ways it's connected to the way the Egyptians do their ful. But they have a special kind of a volcanic dish, or I should say a pan, bowl, pot, whatever you want to call it, that they put on very, very high heat. They mash all of the ful up, and then they put in different, they'll put tomatoes and onions and cumin and hot peppers and different things, and they blend it together, and it's hard to explain. I'm going to see if I can get a couple images while I'm putting this together, but it comes to your table piping hot. And because they use this volcanic dish, that it stays hot. In fact, one time we went to a restaurant, and we timed how long it continued to bubble, and it was well over 10 minutes. So you eat it with bread, you dip bread in it and you eat it. And I've had instances where it will like cauterize the top of my mouth. But having said that, and having it in different places in Yemen, whether it would be at a restaurant in either Sana'a or Taiz, or in my village of Uzla Al Dais in Ba'den at the local restaurant there, ful is a staple dish, and it is one of my favorite. And in this podcast, we will be talking about food. I hope to have some Yemeni-American, Yemeni chefs to come on and talk about the food, where it comes from. And so at number 3 is probably the best ful. No, not probably. It is the best ful in the Middle East, Yemeni ful. Number 2, the Yemeni dialect. Now, I work at a college where there are quite a few Yemeni-Americans that attend. And there are, in fact, a lot of Arabs at my school. And I'll be walking down the hall, and I'll hear somebody behind me, Palestinians, Jordanians, Syrians, all different Arabs, even Egyptians. And I hear their Arabic, and I struggle with it because it's not the Arabic that I learned. Not that I'm particularly fluent in Arabic. I did learn a good amount. I spoke it a lot better when I was there than I do now. There's a lot of distance involved. But whenever I walk down the hall and I hear behind me some students that are talking in Yemeni Arabic, it just brings a smile to my face. There is just a certain rhythm, a certain pattern to it that brings so much familiarity for me from the time that I was in Yemen. And whenever I hear it, I smile and I turn around and I start talking Assalamu alaikum, and just it just takes me back in a lot of ways. But also I have this kinship with Yemenis and Yemeni-Americans that is special because of my experience there. So Yemeni dialect, and I know that Yemenis, when they're together and they're speaking Yemeni dialect, most other Arabs don't know what they're saying, and a lot of times they have to do this kind of code shift, whether Yemenis start speaking in Fusha, or they switch over to terms that are more familiar in the Levant, like in Palestine or in Syria. So it's kind of a niche dialect, and we'll talk. I'm excited to do a podcast just on Yemeni Arabic and kind of delve into what makes it unique. But at number 2, the things that I love most about Yemen is the Yemeni dialect. And number 1, without hesitation, it's Yemeni hospitality and friendliness. Whenever you engage with a Yemeni or Yemeni-American, and the immediate thing is just how friendly and how hospitable they are. You'll ask other Arabs about Yemenis, and I have, and they all say the same thing about how genuine and how hospitable the Yemenis are. I want to share quickly a story. A couple buddies of mine, in fact, Michael Morse is the one that helped me build the studio. We decided to do a hike from my village in Badan all the way to the town of Kataba along this back road. I always wanted to know, I always came into my village from one side, from Ib, getting there, the hour drive roughly to get to my village. And this was before, obviously, the roads were paved. I always wondered what would that road be like from my village all the way to Kataba. And the other thing about Kataba is it was one of the root towns of one of the ancient cities in Yemen. And I really wanted to kind of experience that. And that's probably, I'll get into more details about that story at another time because there's a lot of funny things happened on that trip. But on that trip, because it took longer than a day, we brought our tents with us. And as the night was coming along, we decided that we would ask one of the local, one of the local farmers if it would be okay if we pitched our tent in their front yard. And they were aghast because they weren't about to let us pitch our tent in their front yard. They insisted that we stay in their house, and we kept telling them that no, this is kind of what this is what we're trying to do. We wanted to kind of camp out in Yemen under the stars and all that. We had to go through all of this for just them to let us do that. And I remember as we kind of set up tent and everything, here comes their kids with all kinds of sweets, with all kinds of tea. And so we're sitting out under the stars drinking tea, eating the sweets that were homemade in the homes of these Yemenis. And that's just one small story in the 2 years that I was there that really accentuate the amazing hospitable nature quality of Yemenis and Yemeni-Americans. And one last thing I would say is whenever I go to Dearborn, I have so many great friends there. I could go on and list them all. One of them I'm going to be having real soon as a guest. But I cannot spend any money when I'm there. I try. Like anything that I want, they look at me like I'm rude if I like reach for my billfold. And it is just such a unique, wonderful quality about Yemenis, Yemeni-Americans that I have experienced over the time since I've returned from Yemen and have made that connection. So those are the three most important things, the greatest things I love about Yemen. But I wanted to share a fourth with you just as kind of a bonus. And you can kind of put it, it's probably not number one, but you can probably interchange it. And that is Yemeni oud music. The oud is I guess you could call it kind of the Arabic version of the guitar. It is played in a unique way with a special pick. It has such a rhythm, a deep kind of rhythm and cadence, and a person that's able to play the oud, they're often able to make it sound sometimes like there's more than one instrument being played. Anybody who's heard it kind of understands that. And so I have so many great memories, whether I'm in a mufraj, one of these sitting rooms in Yemen, way up high, listening to the music, or if I made the long journey from Sana'a, the capital, down to Ib and then to my village, where we would be all packed into a cab with other Yemenis. The taxi driver would have a big cheek load of got, and he had a cassette player that he would stick in his cassette of this classical Yemeni oud, and the sun would be coming down on this long journey, and you would just being so far from home, all the sounds, everything so exotic, and having this Yemeni oud music and the song, love song, whatever being played of some of the classic Yemeni oud players, just stays with me. Sometimes when the sun is setting, I still think about that. I often will jump on my computer and will stick in some Yemeni music. So anyway, so those are the 3+1 things that I love most about Yemen. I hope that you'll tune into this channel going forward, and I thank you for joining me today on The Yemenist.